to introduce yourselves. We'll start with Anne and Rezzy, Jodie and Lydia, because that's how you're sort of appearing on my screens, and then we'll start with the questions. So Anne, if you'd like to introduce yourself and what you currently do.
Hello, my name's Ann Charles. I'm a radio production and technology consultant, and I work across all areas of the radio, audio and broadcasting industries. My background is that I was half radio and online producer and half broadcast engineer. So a lot of my work now, I'm freelance, involves the point where technology and production collide. But before I was freelance, I was at the BBC for 12 years. And my other hat is that I run Radio TechCon, which is the UK radio and audio industry's technical and engineering event.
Cool, thank you. And Rezzy?
Hello, my name's Rezzy. I'm a freelance presenter, so I currently work as a cover presenter for Heart on the network, which is really fun. And I also cover for a radio station in Kent called KMFM.
Thank you. Jodie?
Hey, I'm Jodie Bryant. I am a radio producer. I'm currently the assistant producer on the KISS Breakfast Show, and I've just been also selected to carry on with the new KISS Breakfast Show because it's literally all changed in the last 2 weeks. And I also do a bit of like presenting stuff on the side for Hoxton Radio.
Cool. Lydia?
Hi, my name is Lydia Athey. I'm currently a sound designer and network show producer for Capital.
Cool, thank you. So anyone that's watching, if you want to introduce yourselves in the chat and any questions that you do have for anyone, then I can ask those throughout the session. So I'll kick off and I'm going to start with you, Jodie. How did you get into radio?
So I went to uni in Manchester, at Uni of Manchester, and I literally went to the student radio station on the first day. I was such a loser. So I was like, I'm really keen. And they were like, wow, okay. And then I basically just got really involved in that and I didn't even know what the SRA was, Student Radio Association. And then I kind of went to a few of the training days, networked my butt off, literally, and then just went to as many of those as possible, shadowed as much as possible, and just like went for coffee with literally everyone I met. And it just kind of like carried on from there. But that's how I like began.
Cool. Lydia, what about you?
So I was 16 and I did a 3-day work experience with my local radio station at the time, which was Hallam FM, and wore really bright red lipstick, which for a 16-year-old was intense. And then a year later, they got back in touch with me and said, we're offering up an apprenticeship scheme, which would be in-house. So it'd be kind of a year in-house with the station. And they remembered me from the red lipstick. So I kind of started there, was there for 2 years, went to Manchester, was like Key 103, and then, yeah, kind of at Global now.
Oh, Rezzy?
I'd have to say getting into radio was sending a lot of emails and definitely a lot of coffee meetings. Weirdly enough, I went to university and studied television and video production. So I always wanted to work in telly. And once I graduated from uni, I did start working in television. And it was only after about a year I was researching on an entertainment show that I always wanted to do presenting. And one of my producers recommended that I go and do radio presenting. And it's something that had never crossed my mind. I had no idea how to get into it. I'd never been in a radio studio before, but he was like, you know, go and find a community radio station and pop them an email. So I did. So I started volunteering with a radio station in Watford, which was really close to where I live. It's called Vibe 107.6. I knew nothing. I remember doing like a pre-recorded late night Monday show after they trained me in the studio. And I was thinking, no one's listening to this. Like, how am I going to get, you know, onto a big radio station from this? But weirdly, it did progress. And I think after a few months of doing that, they moved me up to a daytime show and I started learning the ropes on how to use the studio live, and then started sending out endless demos. And then it was from there, like one person picked up a demo and they get you in and you do a show. And from that, then you send out demos again. And because you've got that bit of experience on your email, then other places pick you up and you go in and work for them. And it kind of just went on like that.
That's cool. And what about you, Anne?
So I started out as a volunteer with my local talking newspaper. And talking newspapers are free services for visually impaired people, and you read the newspaper out because, especially when we started out, it wasn't so common for people to have access to screen reading technology. And then I happened to be interviewed on my local radio station about a book I'd been involved in writing, and they invited me back to be a newspaper reviewer when I was a teenager. And then from there, I ended up being a volunteer on what was called the BBC Action Desk, which was a partnership with CSV Media. And I was doing that 2 days a week, and that meant I was in the building. And from there, I then started to get shifts, and shifts turned into contracts, turned into other jobs. So that was my starting point.
That's really cool. So I wanted to obviously branch into any involvement that you have with student radio. Jodie, you mentioned you got involved with Student Station. How did you sort of get involved with them?
So at uni, they do all the, what are they even called? The like fairs, where there's like all the tables with like all the different societies. So that's how I first got involved with, it was called Fuse FM, the Manchester one. It's actually a really small one. So I think it also goes to show that if you can really like go for it, it doesn't matter how small your station is, because it like never wins at the Student Radio Awards or anything. I think by the end I was literally one of the only members left. But yeah, I just was like really keen, and then you got to like treat it like you would want to treat a real kind of experience in a radio station, and like try as many ideas as possible, because like people always say like student radio is the place to make those mistakes, but also have a really good time. And yeah, you just like network, and like on the weekends and stuff I would go into like my local capital Manchester with the presenter James Hall, he used to be on the afternoons there, and I used to shadow his show every Sunday, like even if I was really hungover. And like that's how I learned to use like the play out system at Capital. And then at the end of my final year at uni, Capital Manchester actually got me into Capital in Leicester Square. And then I ended up being the assistant producer on the breakfast show for like 3 weeks, because the girl that does it normally was going on holiday, and I was like, what? This is crazy. So that was kind of like the big jump that helped me.
Very cool. So we've mentioned, obviously, it's great that you're working in different areas within the radio industry. So can you each tell me a bit about your role and what it entails? Start with you, Lydia.
So I'm kind of a split kind of role. So part of me is a sound designer for Capital and Capital Extra. So that's kind of everything from sweepers, top of hours, promotions. And it's funny because the imaging makes up the most of what the listener hears, aside from the adverts. So 99, well, not 99%, but there are a large proportion of what you hear when you listen to Capital is probably what my team's made. And then the other flip side is a network producer. So I've currently working on like the Saturday shows. So I've got like Rob Howard, Amy Vivian, Jimmy Hill. That's like my standard set. And then also part-time doing London Drive. And that's like show producing and yeah, sound design.
Cool. What about you, Rezzy?
So as a presenter, you have to put so much work into your prep. Like I literally love to prep. People laugh at me because they're just like, you come into work so early, but I spend a lot of time. I normally go in about 2 or 3 hours before my show. It's a lot of prep. So looking at your music log, seeing where your content links are going to be, what type of stuff you want to talk about. I love researching, pop stuff and what's going on in the entertainment world, and finding like those little nuggets of stories that no one else has got. And that's the best thing, when you can do a content link on air and people go, I haven't heard that about Jason Derulo eating tuna for breakfast. And you just think, yes, nailed it, because no one else has done the same. So it's a lot of prep, a lot of finding your own content. You have to obviously seg your own show, so that can take a while. I love it to sound super slick, so I spend a lot of time kind of segging my own show. But yeah, it's kind of just mainly doing all the prep. And then obviously once you go in, I think a lot of the shows that I work on, especially on the network, I don't have a producer. So I produce myself, but I've done it for such a long time that I feel really comfortable. I know what I'm doing. So it is kind of weird on the shows when I do have a producer, because I'm like, I like to just do everything myself. I'm a bit of a control freak. But yeah, so other than that, you're just trying to get your content and creating it in your own way so it sounds different to other people, putting your own spin on it, sounding, you know, chatty and personable when you're talking. So yeah, there is a lot that goes into it, especially when you work on the Heart Network. You have to record a show that goes out on the app as well. So you're not just doing a live show, you're pre-recording a second show basically. So you've got to think about doing both. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. But obviously if you're doing competitions and stuff, you're then getting callers on the phone, recording their calls, editing them up and then playing them out, and making sure they sound really slick as well, which is always really nerve-wracking, just in case you go to hit play and then it doesn't play and you're just like, oh God. But yeah, it's all good fun though. It's good. It keeps you on your toes.
Anne?
And my current role's a really nice mixture of stuff. So I used to make programs, and I think the others have talked a lot about what's involved in that. That's kind of constantly being on and having ideas all the time. But now I do technical consultancy. It can be anything and everything. So it can be people will ring me up and ask me to spend some time doing a lot of research for them on a particular topic. So whether they can take one bit of the business that they already do and use it in another country, or how to design some of their systems. And then I do a lot of training and a lot of in-person work, except at the moment. So one of my clients is Broadcast Bionics. So those of you who've ever used what used to be called Phonebox, although it's officially called the Bionic Studio now, we're all going to call it Phonebox, aren't we? So I do a lot of the training when there's a company maybe who's upgraded their system or is installed a new system and the go live support. And they send me in as a trainer, but really I'm also there to have a look at the product development so I can see what teams are doing, and maybe there's, you know, suddenly everyone's using TikTok or suddenly everyone's using a different social media. And feeding that back to the team to sort of make sure that the products are being developed in the right way. And obviously with Bionic stuff, there's never a bug at all. But if there hypothetically was to be a bug, then I'd be spotting that and feeding all of that stuff back in to the development of the system. I've also done some stuff recently with a large organisation you'll have all heard of on metadata. So helping stations to be able to find their content and helping listeners to find the content more easily. And I was involved in doing some work with the BBC on designing the studios for the future and preparing the BBC and other organisations for a world when we do object-based production. So it's really taking the background I have in someone who's made programmes and my geeky obsession with the technology and bringing those two together to just have as much fun as possible and be paid for it.
Oh, love it. Thanks, Anne. And Jodie?
It really varies, but kind of being a producer is just like loads of different things. But I remember when I used to be a student and going to these kind of talks in real life, like people would come up and they'd be a producer and I'd be like, they'd finish the talk and I'd be like, I don't actually know what that means. Like, you're saying all these cool things, but it's because it is so varied. And like, I kind of went into radio wanting to do presenting, and I still do a bit, but I think it's hard, especially in student radio, because you're like presenting and producing all the time. So then when you get into it, you like actually kind of figure out what's going on. But yes, the role is basically like, it's editing, it's like writing interviews, editing interviews, like sorting out guests, coming up with ideas for the show, coming up with like you said, like funny news stories that like no one else is going to find, like maybe the presenters have missed them, or like we have something else to contribute, like sometimes a funny story, just like loads of stuff, and just being busy the whole time. If you're not busy and you're producing a show, that is bad.
Thank you. And so what skills, experience or qualifications do you need to get into the role that you're currently working in now? I'm going to start with you, Anne.
So my role's a bit unusual because it's kind of something I've invented for myself. But I think in terms of any career or any job in radio, try and get as much experience as you can. So if you're in student radio at the moment, don't just sort of go, oh, I'm going to be a presenter and then just present. There's no room for that. You need to be able to know the legal stuff and you need to be able to know the technology. So I'd say make sure while you're in these roles in the student environment that you are understanding how your playout system works. You know how to use your portable recorder, you know how to get noise out of your phone, you know how to do basic fault finding. So if something does go wrong, you can logically think through where the fault is and where the problem might be. Because that's how I got into doing tech stuff. I was working in local radio, and I was often on my own in charge of half the country's radio output. And the only person who could help me was someone on the phone in Birmingham, and I was in Norwich at the time. So very quickly, I kind of learnt how to mend things, or how to at least explain what was wrong in a way that someone who wasn't there could understand. So I'd say don't think of your job as a container and that's all you do. Think about the connections there are to everything else that's going on at your station, and have a go as many different jobs as you can, because the technology side is really creative, and I think a lot of people overlook it because they have a stereotype that it's dry and dull. And actually, if you think about it, without the technology teams, all you're doing is talking to yourself in a small padded room. So if you want it to become radio or a podcast and for other people to hear it, then you need to understand how the technology works. And the best broadcasters really do understand how their technology works. If you watch Radio X and you watch the breakfast show team and you look at how Chris is controlling that desk, you know, he understands his technology, and that's part of what makes him a great broadcaster.
Certainly. What about you, Rezzy?
So when it comes to skills and qualifications, I don't think you need to have a degree as such in radio, although, I mean, I didn't, but obviously it always helps, doesn't it? If you go to university and you study radio, if you go to college and study radio, that's always going to help you because you're getting that experience. I just think you need to have live experience. If you want to be a presenter, I remember someone said to me a million years ago when I first started working as a presenter, if you ever want to get onto radio, you need to have hours and hours of live experience. You need to be able to use a desk really well. And at the time, I'd only just started at a community radio station. I was just doing a pre-record. So that kind of stuck in my head. And I just thought, I just need to get stuck in and do live experience. And it really does help. Like, the more you practice, the more you're doing it, the slicker you're going to become, the more comfortable you're going to become. I remember putting a microphone up and just sounding like a robot. And I don't have a problem in real life with talking, but when it comes to doing it on the radio and you have a microphone in front of you, all of a sudden things are very different. So I think it's really important that, yeah, you get loads of live experience. I think it's obviously, it helps that you feel comfortable talking, and you need to have kind of a clear voice. But again, that comes with practice. I'm sure at the start I used to talk really quickly and maybe not so clear. So I think, again, that comes with the live experience. It's all about being confident. I think understanding, although this is going to sound a little bit scary when I say this, understanding media law. I didn't take a law degree or anything, but I think there's certain things that you can and can't say on the radio. And weirdly, I was thinking about this earlier on, you just learn it along the way. So you get taught as you go what things you can and can't talk about. And to me now, it seems so obvious because I've done it for like 10 years, that things like swearing or over promoting a product that you're talking about on air, but they're all things that you kind of learn along the way. But again, that's a skill that you'll pick up. But I think, as I said, the most important thing is the fact that if you haven't been to university or studied it, we've got hospital radio and we've got community radio, and that's a brilliant way to learn all your skills just from practicing there.
Definitely. Lydia?
So it's a bit of a strange one, like Rezzy said, like, I don't think degrees are necessary, but if you have them, it gives you a great basis of how radio works and how radio is consumed, whereas I had to like learn it on the job. I remember being with a presenter and I was like, what, you don't pick the music? That's amazing. Do you know what I mean? So I was still under that impression that they pick the music. But practical skills, I think for both of my roles, like audio editing, having some kind of knowledge of different softwares, Pro Tools if you're being more sound design specific, Audition if you're being kind of more general, is real key. Again, Playout Systems, Dial-Up, Genesis are the two big players, and Zeta as well that I know Bauer London use. And then the rest of it's a little bit kind of not conventional. So you're almost like a Rubik's Cube of different skills. Like, you've got to be, for a show producer, you've got to be one step ahead of the presenter. You've got to almost be in their brain to know what they're going to do next, see where their fault's going to lie, and being spread across everything. So where's the timings at? What's the content? Is your presenter got a cup of tea ready for the next link? Because the amount of times like Aunt Payne's walked out for tea and the show's not been segged up, stuff like that, you've kind of been one step ahead of where your presenter's at. And For my role as well, like managing talent's a real key part of being a show producer, but it's quite a deceiving name because that's almost saying that kind of like I'm managing the presenter, and that's not the case at all. Like a lot of my job is getting to know who I'm working with, their style, how they land jokes, how they land links, so that when I'm searching for content and doing the whole pre-show content creation, I can kind of take it in their way and craft a link and do things in their style, because there's nothing worse on air than kind of getting that content, getting that nugget that's great, that you're so proud of, and then the presenter lands it really badly on air, and it's because it doesn't fit the presenter. So I think if you're working with talent and you're being kind of that presenter producer format, you really need to get to know who you're working with so you can like adapt and almost speak like them rather than like speaking for yourself. It's their name above the door at the end of the day. They're going to sound really uncomfortable and really kind of not genuine if the link's been made by you and they're just saying it. So I think that kind of communication and that managing talent's really key, especially when you're doing that kind of thing. But yeah, being like persistent and proactive is a big one. Thinking 2 steps ahead, you're always going to be in a better position.
Definitely. Jodie?
Yeah, getting the practical experience is definitely like more important than anything. I don't think at my job they even know I went to uni or did a degree. But like you need to like find a way to get that experience, because like having that, you need to know, like Lydia said, like Audition, Pro Tools, and like all the play out systems, like as many different ones as you can, because they're all a bit different but kind of similar. But it's good to like know the layouts and just like know how to seg on like all the different ones. So I found like going in, for example, to Capital Manchester or like any local stations and just like shadowing, but then also kind of just being like, oh, can I like seg this link, or can I edit this on Audition? Like, can you show me this? Like, what effect have you done to do this? And kind of just building that up more and more and more until confidently you can finally be like, yep, I can use Audition. Like I know what's going on, because it's really annoying that some of these programs are so inaccessible until you're actually kind of in the building and you're given the programs to use. But yeah, those programs, and also just positivity is so important. Negativity does not go down well in radio. And also, like Lydia said, like you are dealing with the presenters quite a lot, and sometimes like obviously they're the star of the show, and sometimes if they're having a bad day and something goes wrong and they don't react well, you've got to bring them back up, and you've always got to just be like positive. So that's really important as well.
Definitely. I've got a question from Emma Snow. She said, this is such an inspirational panel. A lot of young women in the industry struggle with confidence and struggle to believe in themselves. What would your main advice be to have confidence in your own abilities? I'll start with Lydia.
I think there's this real misconception in the radio world that it's a man's world. And it's really strange because like all the stations that I've worked at, their target audience has been females 25 to 35. And I remember being in one job where someone turned around to me and was like, wow, you just really get the audience. It must be because you're a female. And it was really kind of, I was like, no, not really. Because I think men generally kind of focus on the technical side of things, whereas especially with imaging, you can get lost in kind of plugins and whizzes and bangs and stuff. When in fact, that person's listening to it at the other end. Like if you can use kind of like the emotional skills that we have to kind of gain the listener, like that's a real key. But I just don't know. There's no reason that we can't compete with the men, because actually we're a real key advantage.
Yeah, I agree. Anne, what about you?
Get yourself a supportive network around you, not just at work, but also outside work. So, for example, I'm one of the admins of Sound Women Network, which is a group on Facebook that emerged when Sound Women, the organisation, closed. I think in terms of the confidence, it is a case of don't be afraid of having a go. And over time, you will find that your confidence increases because you know you've done stuff before. And so I think when you're starting out, it's quite easy to be slightly moved around from pillar to post because someone will say something's not right, and it can be hard to unpick whether that's them telling you that something's not right or if that's them telling you something that's wrong. And I do see a lot of people starting out who are very susceptible to bullying culture in the office. So I think it is also, if you feel that you're being bullied, then you probably are being, and find other people within your organisation that you can talk to, or come and talk to us in San Women Network confidentially. Yeah, don't be shy of having a go, and remember that sometimes, although this will be a sweeping statement, you know, sometimes men can come across as overconfident and women can come across as underconfident, and that even plays out in when we apply for jobs. There's some research that says women tend to only apply for jobs when they think they can fulfill 80 to 90% of the requirements, and men are more like 40%. So nobody knows everything, and you probably know more than you think. So keep trying stuff, and find your allies inside your workplace and outside your workplace, and the people who will be the one who will show you how to use the playout system or show you how to use the editor, and then it will just build from there.
Thanks, Anne. It'll be good to hear from you, Rezzy, because obviously you're very front facing being a presenter. Do you obviously lack confidence, or do you struggle obviously being front facing?
I think as a presenter, it's really, the confidence thing is such a difficult one. I think that it's so hard because as you said, you are the person that's the name or front face, the one that's talking. So you're the one that gets, you're the one that gets the comments from people on Twitter or people messaging on Instagram being like, oh, I can't stand your voice. And I've done it for such a long time in radio and television. And I've had so many situations where people have sent me really nasty messages on Twitter or Instagram, people that have been listening to a radio show or people that have been watching me on telly. And weirdly now, it really doesn't bother me. If anything, I actually make light of it on my Instagram stories, and often I'll repost them just for a bit of a giggle, because it really doesn't bother me at all. But I think in general, when you're trying to progress in your career as a presenter, it's such a fierce industry, and it's so competitive. And in that sense, you have to be really good at taking feedback. And I remember when I first started in radio, spending ages making a demo. It was to send to Capital in London, and I spent hours doing it, and I just thought it was amazing. And I sent it to the managing editor of Capital in London, and he replied with an email. It wasn't the email I thought he was going to reply. He literally, I want to say, ripped it apart, but he didn't. It was really good feedback. And I think at the time I remember reading it and being like, I'm never going to make it as a presenter. I just spent ages making this demo. I thought it was amazing. And he's listened to it and thinks it's awful. But I took a couple of weeks out and I thought, you know what? I'm going to come back and I'm going to tackle this. And I read through his email, and everything he said was really good feedback. And it was all stuff that actually I have taken on board and has really helped me improve. So I think in that sense, if you're sending demos out to people, you really have to be wary that sometimes they're not going to email back with what you want to hear. But often when they do email back, they're taking the time out of their day to send you an email back, which is amazing. And I think it's really important to not take the feedback personally. I think even now with listening sessions that I do with my bosses, I remember when I first started working in radio, I worked at Bauer, and when my boss suggested doing an air check on my shows once every 2 weeks, I hated it, because I almost felt like it was a criticism towards me, because it's so hard not to take things personally. But now I've gotten so used to it, and they are so helpful. And something I do find as well, if I do feel like I'm lacking confidence, I like to write a little list of things that I've achieved. It's funny how easily we can take things for granted. And I do this all the time. I remember once saying to someone, oh, I feel like I'm not doing very well in my career. I'm working at Channel 5 and I've got this radio show at Bauer. And my friend was like, oh my God, listen to you. There are people out there that would be like, I would love to have that show at Channel 5 and I'd love to have that radio show at Bauer. And I thought, you know what, you're totally right. I'm being a spoiled brat. So I started writing a list on my phone of all the things that I achieve. And if I have days where I'm feeling less confident, or if I've had an email back and they've given me the feedback that I wasn't quite expecting, I do tend to go through my list and have a look, and that kind of helps build me up. So it's really difficult, and I do really get the whole confidence thing, but I think little things like that will definitely help.
Yeah, definitely. Jodie?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Rezzy just said. Like the confidence thing, it is a big thing in radio, but you just like, it grows with rejection, if that makes sense. Because like I remember finishing uni and doing all the student radio, like being in at Capital Manchester. I was like on the street team, and I was like, I am ready. I was like, I'm gonna get a job. Like, this is amazing. And then I like applied to all these jobs at like Bauer, Global, Virgin, like all in London, because I was moving back to London. I like didn't even get a single interview, and I was like, what? I was like, but I've done all this experience, and like and I didn't even get a reply from like any of them. Then like I did a bit more work experience, and I got like 2 replies, and then I got a bit more work experience, and then I started getting interviews. And it's just like, you have so many knockbacks, but there's always so many people, because radio is such a small industry. And you think, like, I literally thought I was doing so much, and I was like, I must be doing more work than every single person. But you're not. Like, everyone who wants to get into radio bad enough is doing so much work, and you just got to like keep going. And yeah, with the knocks, like, your confidence grows, because it pushes you to kind of do that bit more, or like go into a new station and learn a new skill, and then you have that on your CV, and you're like, didn't have that before. So I just think you got to like keep going, and that will help your confidence as well.
Thank you. So I've got another question from an attendee. They've said, if your aim is to be a radio presenter, do you usually have to work on the production side first? And what kind of jobs would you be doing before they allow you to get on air? Lydia?
I suppose it's a strange one, because there's no set route to anything in radio. A lot of the time people accidentally find themselves somewhere. But I think if you're dead set on being a presenter, it takes time. Crafting your style and your character, it takes a lot of time, and getting to know you as a personality on air. So I think if you can gain experience through tech hopping, so like getting involved in stations and being able to be an asset as running the desk and stuff like that, gives you great technical side. But keep the presenter stuff, keep it going, keep the demos sending out, get the feedback, send another demo out, get feedback, and you will break through. It's just persistence.
Definitely. Jodie?
Yeah, I've like from a personal experience, like I started radio wanting to be a presenter, and like I still do really enjoy doing presenting kind of on the side. But I think once you're in a building and like doing other stuff, you realize how much fun other jobs are. So I don't know, I think like if you, like what Lydia said, like you've got to keep being really persistent and really dedicated if you want it that badly. But it is so hard. Like, you need to like do demo feedback, like you said, and like amongst it all, you might just like land somewhere. And then lots of people also, when you're going into radio, loads of people were like, you have to make the decision, like producer or presenter. And I was like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? Like, this is a nightmare. Because like, they were like, you will not make money quickly being a presenter. And because it's such a small market. And so I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to try and go in a different way. And then I kind of just like landed in like production, and I was like, oh, I'm actually really enjoying it. And I'm still doing presenting stuff, and I'm still recording demos, and I'm like talking to people who are like giving me critiques, but I'm also really enjoying like learning and crafting, producing on the breakfast show, which is like one of the top 3 breakfast shows in London for like our age group. So you can definitely do both, and I would really recommend doing both as well.
We've got quite a few questions to get through, so I'll sort of ask each of you a couple each. So Anne, I'm going to ask you this one. Do you think COVID-19 will affect our ability to secure work experience, and do you have any tips for getting placements?
It depends really how long COVID-19 is going on. I know it's already affected some people who had apprenticeships with Global, because they kind of did a bit of on-site work and then they got put on furlough, and I don't know what's going to happen, if they'll get put back off, or how much practical experience they'll have. It is always difficult when you can't do things on site, and obviously this week we've had more bad news in terms of job vacancies within the industry as a whole. So there is a freeze on recruitment for some of our big groups. So welcome to a career in radio. I think in terms of getting experience, it depends if you want experience at a station or if you want to learn some of the skills that are useful. So, for example, we've talked quite a bit about audio editing. You don't have to learn all of the audio editors, because once you've learned one, it's pretty easy to transfer to another one. But there are options to kind of get some of the skills yourself. So, for example, you can help with a talking newspaper. A lot of them are recording remotely at the moment and need people with those kind of skills. You can set up a podcast. You can do a little COVID home diaries or something, record other people and get some practice at recording and editing. Still be persistent. It could be an advantage because we've now got people spread all over the country, and we've got more of a remembrance that we are able to work remotely. So perhaps you've got some stories going on in your area, and now's the time to start pitching them, because they don't have to pay you for a whole day. You could be like, hey, you know, our local area around here, we've just had the first food market that's been open for weeks and weeks and weeks, so you know, maybe you could go out and get some material for that. So it is difficult, but again, if you're able to think laterally, think about how you can use this time to your advantage and do that, would be my suggestion. Yeah.
Thank you. So Rezzy, I've got a question for you. Someone's asked, has a TV production course helped with radio presenting?
Oh, that is a difficult question. I guess in the sense that with my television production course I did, it was very good in the practical sense that I got to do lots of stuff in front of a camera, and I got to do loads of presenting. Like, we were told for our projects, it was like, right, you're going to have 5 weeks and you're going to make a television show that we're going to film as live, and I got to play presenter. So I guess in that sense, I got to build on my presenting skills and feeling confident filling, because often that's a really important part of radio as well. You need to be really good with being able to chat, and sometimes you may have an extra 5 seconds that you need to chat before you finish the end of the ramp that goes into the break. So you've got to be good with that type of stuff. So I guess that has helped in that sense. But if I'm being completely honest, I did my TV and video production course because I wanted to do television. And when I came out from uni, the stuff that I've learned from the community radio, I went in there knowing nothing. So they've literally taught me everything. So I don't feel like you necessarily need to do a TV and video production course now. I think hospital radio and community radio are so good, and so many places listen to them. Like a million years ago, I was demoing at Capital, and they knew all the presenters at 5, the community station I worked at, and often they were getting those presenters into demo. So I don't think it's necessary. I think now that university fees are so expensive as well, I think just go to a community radio or hospital radio. I think that's the best way to learn, get your experiences.
Thank you. And then I've got another question here. Someone said that they have an upcoming work experience placement at a local radio station. What tips would you give that would help me make a good first impression? I'm going to ask you first, Lydia.
Wear really bright red lipstick. No, it helped for me because they remembered me, but spend time with every single department. Even if you want to be a presenter, spend time with news, spend time with travel, spend time with ads, because you're in such a privileged position when you're doing placement, because they want to help you, they want to teach you. In radio, you get a lot of the time people are passionate about what they do. So if you kind of feed that and be like, well, tell me, teach me, how do you make a news bulletin? How do you decide what stories go into it? And if you show intrigue, a lot of the time, people will kind of want to help you and want to teach you. So make sure, even if you want to be a presenter, don't just sit in the studio for the entire time. Spend time with everyone and try and learn and make contacts. It's a great and easy way to network.
Mm-hmm. Anne, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, so exactly what you said. Be nice to people, be curious, be interested. For heaven's sake, listen to the station before you turn up. Seriously, I've had that before. Don't just sit in the corner being scared. Don't sit in the studio on your phone. Two things that will help you that I feel very old saying, but certainly this first one. You get people on air and you get contacts by phoning them on an actual phone and talking, and not just relying on emails and texts. And that's a skill that I see a lot of Gen Z coming through that they need to develop. So that I will just, from my grand old age of being in my mid-30s now, be like, don't forget the telephone. And the other thing is get a hold for about £5. You can get yourself some headphone splitters. I haven't got one to hand, but they are little devices that let you plug in 2 headphones into one headphone socket. That is golden if you're on work experience, because it means if someone's editing a package or editing something, you can plug your headphones in as well, and you can listen along and you can see what they're doing. And because watching people edit is really helpful, but if you can hear what they're doing at the same time, then that will be even better. So invest in some headphone splitters, turn up with those, and they'll be like well impressed.
Very useful to know, thank you. So the next question is, would you say community radio is the best way to get into radio still? And in terms of producing, presenting and engineering, etc.? Jodie, would you like to answer this one?
I think it depends. I think yes, but I also think I don't know if you can only like talk to people in the student radio association. Like even if you're not at uni, like you can find their Twitters, you can find their Instagrams, and I just think like networking through the student radio association has literally helped me so much. Like I would not be working in radio without Student Radio Association. And I think because there's so many people that now work in radio, like the head producer on Absolute Radio Breakfast went to like one of my training days, and I was like, wow, he seems cool. And now he like came in my building and I was like, oh, it's this guy. And like you just know everyone from all these events. And then they remember you, and because it is such a small industry, just like it's so easy to contact people, and just finding their Twitters and Instagrams, like, and guessing emails is the easiest thing in the world. Everyone at the BBC is first name, full stop, surname at bbc.co.uk. But yeah, just like messaging them, going for coffees now that we're kind of allowed to, and like not straight away going in with the demands, like the asking for the work experiences, because you've got to like show your passion, and you've got to go for the coffees, ask for advice, like maybe do a few shadowings, and then they might let you go in for some work experience or like introduce you to someone else. And that's just like how it happens.
Yeah, it's so important in terms of networking, not, like you said, Jodie, not to meet them with the intention of getting a job. It's just because the industry is so small. So it's like, just meet them, get to know them, ask them advice. Don't ask them for a job straight away.
Exactly. And people in radio love giving advice because everyone has got into it so differently that everyone's story is a bit different, and they like love talking about it. And like people who are actually interested in radio are interested in everyone's stories as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so I've got another question here. Lydia, you may be best in terms of answering this. And someone said, I aim quite high when it comes to trying to get radio guests on my student talk show. Do you have tips on how best to get in touch with potential guests in the industry when you don't have a direct contact for them?
I think what Jodie said is great, like guessing emails. The same with Global, it's first name dot last name. Again, using the power of social media. If you've got a platform, which 99% of us do now, go through that way, DM them, message them, and it's going to be the easiest way. Again, people are so passionate, and usually they love talking about radio. And if you're going for specific people, you find an interest in that person, they're going to want to kind of give back. So yeah, social media is definitely the way forward.
Mm-hmm. And I've got a question from Oliver. He said, hi all, I'm intently listening to this talk. Your stories are very motivational and inspirational. As someone who's starting out in radio, how do you find the motivation to keep going? For instance, trying to work your way through uni, balancing uni work and breaking into the industry at the same time. Rezzy?
Oh, it is so hard to keep motivated, seriously. I think I just didn't want to fail. I'm one of those people that I'm just like, I get an idea in my head and I just want to do it. And even now people say to me, how on earth do you find the motivation to keep going? I'm like, goodness knows, I don't sleep. It is hard, and I completely get it. Like, I was the same when I first started out. I was working full time in television, doing production and doing radio on the weekend, as well as a tiny little presenting gig for like a shopping channel. So I was working 7 days a week. And then I just kept going, and I just kept pushing myself, because I was like, that you've got to keep going, because the minute you slack, someone else will jump in there and swoop that job from right underneath your feet. And so many people want to work in radio, and radio now is so tiny, unfortunately. There isn't a lot of jobs. So I think that's something that always keeps me motivated. But it's really hard, especially if you're making 5 demos and then sending them out to everyone, and then no one comes back to you, and then you're just like, now what do I do? But I think it's really important to write lists, Oliver. I'm a big person with lists. I find lists really help. So I write a massive list of all the things that I want to do, and I kind of go through and tick them off as I go. And once you've sent out all your demos, or you've sent all your emails out to people, I always wait a few weeks. I give myself 3 weeks. It's like the 3-week rule. Wait 3 weeks to see if anyone gets back to you. And then you start going all over again, making new demos and sending them out. And it is really difficult. But in the end, once you get that job, like I remember my first network shift I did on Heart. I was in their studio is just amazing. It's like flying a spaceship. And I was in their studio, and I just thought to myself, this hard work has paid off. Like, it's taken me 8 years to get here, 8 years of never saying no to anything, meeting up with everyone. One day I think I drove from Hertfordshire to Southampton for a meeting, to Wales for a meeting, and then back. And I always did stuff like that, never said no, just kept pushing myself. And once you get there, it will be so worth it, because as soon as you get in, as soon as you can get your foot through the door, it is such a tiny world. And then you start to meet people, and obviously people move around so much that you just never know who's going to end up where. And then it's not easy, but then it's easier to be able to move around, because you start to meet people and make a name for yourself. But it's just getting your foot through the door. But it's definitely worth it. So you just have to keep going.
Thank you, Rezzy. We've spoken a lot about, obviously, confidence, and you may be able to answer this one. And someone's asked, if you want to try student radio but you lack confidence, what tips would you have to overcome this?
Just do it.
Yeah, just go for it, because like, student radio is the place to make mistakes. Like, I had such stupid games on my student radio show that were literally horrifying. But no one judges you, and they're really fun. And also, there's so many people in the radio societies and like at the SRA conference, like literally like making a fool of themselves. Like, it's literally fine, and it is so fun, and you like meet loads of friends as well.
Definitely. And Jonas has asked a question: as producers, are you in charge of finding DJs for your show? If so, what makes a DJ stand out to you, and how important is it having a social media presence? Lydia, you touched on that earlier, so it'll be good to hear a bit more about that.
It depends what you mean by DJs. Like, do you mean like presenters, or do you mean actual DJs? Because a lot of the time, like when we do, like certainly with Capital, these are guest mixes that have come through record labels. So when you get like in Global, we have a separate team that work with dealing with guests and artists and stuff like that. The other flip side, it's done in-house. So I've made quite a few weekender mixes. So that's another thing, another string to your bow. If you need a DJ, like, or do you need a DJ or do you need a hot mix? If you need a hot mix, you can make a hot mix. You don't necessarily need to go to the extent and expense to find a DJ, but that is if you mean a literal DJ or a presenter.
Thank you. Just going through the questions. So Daniel was asked, as someone who wants to get into production, and even though I'm still making content, given the current pandemic and the issues with the cuts taking place in many organisations, what's the best way to keep ahead and gain shadowing, work experience, or even freelance work? And it might be good to hear from you, because I know you do a lot of freelance work.
If you know the answer, tell me. I think this week has definitely been one of those weeks for just needing a little regroup mentally for everybody, because it's tough, right? The state of, I think you've got the distinction between radio and then the wider audio world. You're very lucky in terms of the UK is a world leader in terms of radio and audio. I've been so lucky to have been able to go around the world with my work, and I think we're really up there, us and Australia probably kind of battling it out in terms of English language stuff for radio, and then America probably taking the slight lead in terms of podcasting. So the good news is that we have 4 main radio groups left in this country, and they broadly have money. So, okay, at the moment the advertising revenues are down, but Global, Bauer, Capital and the BBC are all pretty well funded. So once you can get in, then there is a career for you. When you're starting out and when you're freelance, it is tricky. I would have a look at the moment, depending on what kind of programs you want to make. If you're in the world of speech, compared to what it was 10, 15 years ago, things are much better. We've got Times Radio that's just launched. We've still got Radio 4. We've still got the independent production companies, and we've got podcasting. And so many companies and organizations now are wanting to invest in doing speech-based podcasts. So I would hone some of your skills on producing some podcasts, because you can start something up yourself, or you can find a local organization that wants to do a mini series. I would just do a mini series, like do 6 or 8 episodes and a self-contained series. You will learn a lot. You won't learn the life skills, but you will learn a lot of everything else from doing that. And then in terms of freelancing, it's just a case of constant ideas, constant contacts. The Audio UK have got a lot of trainings that they run about being freelance audio producers, and how to pitch ideas. And there's a bit of etiquette around pitching. So you can kind of pitch in a certain way to make sure that your ideas are protected, but there's a general idea that you don't take one idea to a company and take the same idea to another company until the first company's rejected it. So there's stuff around that, but think about where you want to make programs for and start thinking about ideas for them and start pitching. Even if it's not just whole programs, find out who is producing and start pitching ideas and pitching features. That can be another way, but it's like anything, it's a little bit nebulous because you've just got to get in there, really. It's not easy. And I think, like the others were saying, your first job is the hardest to get because you're competing against everyone in the world who's got as little experience as you have. And it's never easy, but it's easier because in 5 years' time, you'll have 5 years' experience. And that's so much more than everyone who's just starting out has got. So just hang on in there. And it is hard, and we've all been through that hardness. So don't think it's just you.
Thank you, Anne. So I've got a question from Catherine. She says, if you have strong skills and background using a range of playout software, including Pro Tools, Audition, and Logic Pro, how is best to present your skills and who is best to approach? She says she's really interested in imaging, producing and presenting. Lydia?
Imaging, oh my God, if you have a basis of Pro Tools, you are already winning. Like, I had to learn in the first 6 months. And like I said, it's a hard nut to crack. Pro Tools is hard, so top marks for that. SoundCloud for imaging is your best bet. All of the sound designers, sound producers from Global and Capital, because that's kind of the two big teams in the UK right now, are on SoundCloud. Listen, get to know their style, make a demo yourself. Sound effects are free, music is free. Voiceovers, you have one, it's free. Make a demo, package it up, send it to Ashley Bard, who heads up the team at Global, send it to Chris Ward and Joe Thomas, which head up the Bauer team. Because there's so little producers in the country right now. So if you're heading for imaging, you are really good stead. Again, just package it up. Sound is such an easy thing to sell, and send it.
Thank you. So I want to end on a high, and I've got a question for all of you. So the first thing is, what have been your highlights so far working in the radio industry? And then also, what advice would you give people wanting to get into the different roles that you're currently working in? I'll start with you, Rezzy.
Okay, so highlights. Definitely been a highlight being able to cover on the Heart Network. That's just amazing. Like, it's always been something I've been wanting to achieve for a really long time. So the fact that I get to do that is really great. And I'm really grateful for every time I'm there. I really do appreciate it. Another highlight I've had in my career is being able to kick Eamon Holmes and Ruth Langsford out of a radio studio. I love them. They are like TV royalty. Years ago, I used to work at Bauer, and I had a radio show on Heat Radio, which is like the radio station for Heat magazine. And it was like a 1 o'clock lunchtime request show. But my studio I had at Bauer was often used for all the entertainment interviews. And I casually swan down to the studio at like 10 to 1, thinking, oh, it's cool, I can just get in there and get my show ready to go. And there was Eamon and Ruth being filmed for an entertainment interview. And I couldn't get them out the studio, and I was massively panicking. So eventually we had to get someone down, and they managed to kick them out. But it was a highlight, because I was like, yes, the one thing I've achieved in my career is being able to kick them out the studio. But they were very, very lovely. When it comes to advice, do you want me to do advice as well?
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah, so when it comes to advice, I would say it can take time, to, especially if you wanted to become a presenter. It's weird, because I know we've all said this today, like everyone's journey is so different, and for some people it's really easy. From my personal experience, it's taken me a really long time of working hard and never say no to anything. Like, I've said yes to so many things, which meant I've had to do overnight shows and go to like friends' weddings during the day, and then go back to Leicester Square and do another overnight show and have no sleep for like 2 days. But as soon as you say no to something, as I mentioned earlier, someone else will just swoop in there and take it from you. So you don't want to give anyone else that opportunity. Be nice to everyone, as hard as it is sometimes. I think radio is such a small world. And if there's been times in the past where my contracts have finished and I've had to work for a month knowing that I wasn't going to be coming back, but I've always been very professional and put 101% into my shows, because you never know who's listening. And it could be the one time you go in and do a really bad performance, and then someone from like, I don't know, Radio 1 is listening, and they're like, we're not going to give her a job now. So I think that's really important as well. And something else I would say actually is make sure you spell check all your emails you send to people. I once sent an email to a radio station and misspelt the name of their radio station and it didn't go down well. I didn't get a coffee meeting. So I think that's something that's really important as well. But as long as you keep in mind that it's not easy, it is a lot of hard work, but it's so rewarding once you get there. So you've just got to keep pushing through.
Thank you, Rezzy. What about you, Lydia?
So my career highlight, I suppose there's been loads of like little wins in my career so far, but a big one was the Summertime Ball, well, the Best of Capital Summertime Ball this year. It was my first Summertime Ball. I was like so excited, and Rona happened and that messed everything up. So doing the Best of Summertime Ball is like this amazing opportunity to like push boundaries and bring the event of the summer to people's homes. I was lucky enough to be given the after party, and because it was so new and no one really knew how it was going to work out, they kind of give me full control. So I kind of gathered the audio and worked with a real great presenter called Niall Gray and recrafted that show, and we crafted it together. It ended up being a really successful show, and by putting the man hours in, which I think I probably spent 24 hours on it for like the whole week, it's been the show that's kind of I've been recognised for, which has led me to bigger roles within what I'm currently doing and covering bigger shows. So even though there's sleepless nights and that so much effort and overthinking and checking things 3 times seems so excessive at the time, they really do pay off. So yeah, that was a massive career highlight for me. Advice: consume as much as possible. Consume, listen to different radio stations, listen to different podcasts, because if you think about it, by the time the guys that are in student radio right now get into the radio industry, it's going to look like such a different place. So you're at such a privileged position where you can try things and you can develop the next like image of radio of what it's going to be in the next 5 years. So in your stations, wherever you might be in the UK right now, push boundaries, try stupid stuff, break the format. I've worked a lot over the past few years with the SRAs and heard so many radio stations that sound very much like they are trying to replicate what big networks are doing now, and that's no benefit, because by the time the guys come in, the network's going to look really different. So be that next idea, or be the forward thinking and change the clock around and mess the programming up, because probably that's going to be the best idea that you're going to bring to the table once you get inside these big buildings. So yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you, Lydia. Jodie?
Career highlights so far. So basically, I started working at Bauer for Scala Radio, which is like a new classical music station, but it was a secret. and it launching was definitely a highlight because I was like part of all the secret behind the scenes stuff, and then it kind of came out and was like this massive thing, and it was really cool. And then at Bauer also, once you're in, which you will all get in, I'm sure, Absolute Radio do this thing called like the documentary scheme, and you basically like pitch an idea for an hour-long audio documentary, and Paul Sylvester, who's the boss of Absolute, basically approves it or like gives you feedback and like you try again. And then I like pitched this idea, and I was still relatively new at Bauer about Britpop, and like because it was like 25-year anniversary of like the battle of Britpop with Blur and Oasis, and like the like New Labour and Britpop and like Tony Blair, and I like pitched this really random idea, and he was like, yeah, like we're gonna make it. And then so I had to make it, so I made this full documentary, like I had to find the presenters, the people we interviewed, like edit it together, like I'd never made anything like that before. And then it played out on like actual Absolute Radio and Absolute Radio 90s, and it was just like really amazing to like have this thing that I'd completely made myself, directed, written, idea, everything. And like some of the emails they got as well were like really positive, and it was just really amazing to like to be like I did like all this. So that, and then one more basically, I was doing work experience at KISS before I got a job there, and I worked at the Haunted House Party, which is like their Halloween version of the Summertime Ball, and I was like running around with microphones, and basically at the end of the night, one of the guys at KISS called Josh was like, oh, thanks mate, I owe you one, like whenever you want a favor, like you got it. And then like the next week, Miley Cyrus was coming into the KISS studios, and they knew I loved Miley Cyrus, so they were like, Jodie, Miley's coming in. And I got to take the Polaroid of her and Mark Ronson and meet her and get a Polaroid with her myself. So that was a big highlight for me. And then advice wise, I would just say, just keep going. Like you will get there. It's so hard. And yeah, just like email. Like sometimes you might feel like you're pestering, but normally it doesn't matter because people in radio are just really busy and like they might have just missed your email. So just like be polite and just don't be rude. And if you pester, you will get there.
Thank you. Anne?
So career highlights. I think when I was in program making, and I had a program that ended up on Pick of the Year, and it went really well. And when I came into the office, I got a standing ovation and a bottle of champagne from the controller. So that was really good. And then just some of the studios I've been able to be in, live and pre-recorded. You know, I've been in Radio 1 Breakfast Show. I've been in the WNYC Radio Lab studios, and I've been. Particular highlight was being on with the team when the Carl and Jackie O show was going out in Sydney. It's a huge show over there, and that was a real kind of, what am I doing here? Pinch yourself moment. On that same trip, you know, most of radio is probably meetings and spreadsheets, but every 10 years you'll get a really glamorous moment, and it's the kind of thing people think you do all the time. So on that trip we did drink a bar dry of champagne as well, so that was pretty good. And then that doesn't happen every day, unfortunately. And then in terms of career advice, I think we've probably covered quite a lot of it. I would say no matter what job you want to do or are doing now, spend a day shadowing the broadcast engineers, because it could change your life. It will completely blow your mind, and it could well take you in a career trajectory even that you weren't even sure it was going to happen. And the other thing is that once you are in, remember that position actually holds quite a lot of privilege and power. So use that privilege that you hold to focus attention on voices and stories that don't get heard, and to hold the door open even wider for more people to come through, because we really need to shake this industry up.
Thank you. I know we've run over, but I just want to say a massive thank you for obviously taking the time to speak to me. You've been an inspiration to me, and we've had so many positive messages come through, which has been great to see. Before we go, how can any of the members get in contact with you if they have any questions? What's the best way? Anne?
Oh, sorry, carry on.
Oh, go on, Lydia.
I was going to say, like, social media, like Lydia Athey on Instagram, Lydia Ghdjar Athey on Twitter. My email, lydia.athey@global.com. which is like them for everyone that works at Global. So yeah, throw me a line and I'll more than happy be able to help.
Rezzy?
Yeah, I say the same, social media. So yeah, so Rezzy Ghdjar, sorry, on Twitter or Instagram. I'm sure there's not many other Rezzys on there, so you'll find it. But yeah, I think I'm pretty good at replying back to people. I always try and take like 5 minutes each day and go through my messages and reply back to people. So yeah, feel free to get in touch, definitely.
Thank you. Anne?
My website is anncharles.tv, that's ANNCHARLES.tv, and my Twitter handle is @SparkyAnnC, and also search for Sound Women Network on Facebook, because in there we do a Tech Tuesday every other week. So if you have any technical questions or things that you're getting stuck with, you can post a question in the group and then we'll answer it on our live video.
Thank you. And Jodie?
Sorry, I don't know if you can hear, there's an ice cream van outside. That's not me. But yeah, Twitter or Instagram @Jodie Bryant, they're the same. So, and they're just both covered in radio stuff. You'll definitely know it's me. I'm such a radio nerd.
Cool, thank you. And thank you for Student Opportunities Festival as well. So I hope everyone has a lovely evening, and thank you for attending our talk. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.